front and center.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for this opportunity to share my life with Baba. And I feel like all our lives resonate. So it feels like a sharing together to me. I was thinking, if there's an image that defines the comfort and refuge of being in Baba's fold, it's his ever-present embrace. It's like a hug. And to be able to share our lives together, talk about them, is like an extension of that embrace. It's like a long sigh. It's like a feeling of, at last, I belong, and at last I'm here with you. So it really feels like a good fortune. And, growing up with the Mandali, they always talked about how fortunate we all are to be with Baba, to be so close to his advent, to be so near him. And I think that was not a statement of pride. It was actually a statement of great humility. It was kind of like a pinch in the arm. Like, can you believe it? Can you believe how we could be worthy of this? Like, is this really true? But it was also a reminder to me that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why we're here or how this connection happened. It's really not our business to try to understand him or understand any of this. It's just what matters is that we're here and we're completely accepting and believing in this beautiful thing of being with him, and that we can't take it lightly or for granted. So when Buzz asked me to talk at this talk, first I said, oh dear. And then I said, but I have no story. That's my story, is that I have no story. But, so much of my story is my family's story. It's about being directly and indirectly really at the right place at the right time. I have no miracles to share, no major experiences, no fireworks, no outward evidence of any progress. And Buzz said, well, that's it. None of us have any of that. So, that was good. But also, some people have great dramatic coming to Baba stories. I don't have that either. So you're just going to have to put up with plain old stories with me today. What was interesting, though, was the theme of the Sahavas, the one about external and internal links. And I think in my case, I feel like my family's story and their lives played out to be the outer links that provided me with the deep foundation of the inner links with other Baba lovers and with Baba. So like everyone in my generation, all of you, I did not meet Baba. And I feel like that hardly matters because as we go forward, there'll come a time that no one would have met Baba, except internally. What I did get a chance to do, even though I didn't meet Baba, I was a very shy young child. And what I did do then as a little girl was just observe and absorb. And I think those really were the seeds that were sown for me. Just watching people's lives with Baba, just being at Baba programs, being just part. And those were seeds, like I said. And now I feel like as a young adult, since we're talking about being a young adult with Baba, I feel like it's time for me to harvest those seeds with Baba's grace and his love. And I see that all around with a lot of my young Baba friends. It's time to do that. It's kind of like a culmination of everything that we witnessed, and it's time for it to come to bloom. It's a test. It's all coming to head, how we're going to live our lives with Baba, interaction with him, participation with him. It just feels like a very rich time. Because I'm talking so much about my family's background, I feel like I should tell you a little bit about them, just because they've been so instrumental in shaping my own view of the world, but definitely also my life with Baba. So everyone in my family had met Baba physically. In fact, that was just my childhood. it was always a given. Everyone around you had met Baba, and not only met him, but had incredible stories and experiences. They were all stalwarts in their love and faith. Um, of course, I could not, as a child, understand the gravity of that. And looking back, I think it was a good thing, because I could just feel them experientially. I didn't have the head mental know-how of their greatness or who they were. So it was a childhood that was it was modest in outward means, but it was very rich in the company of these people. I was very close with my grandparents, so I'll give you a little bit of a background on them. My grandfather, he came to Baba in 1958. His journey was a long one because he was a real seeker. He was a very intellectual person. He worked as a judge. He had studied law, and he was very intellectual and had a very questioning mind. Very strong personality, never willing to settle for anything mediocre in regards to anything in life, so let alone God. He was looking, he was seriously looking for the meaning of life, and really a master. And he came from, our family comes from this place called Sindh, which is now in Pakistan. The country was divided, and Sindh happened to be there. So the whole family moved during the partition of India, which was, they lost everything they had and had to resettle. Anyway, so the first story did start in Sindh, believe it or not. I don't quite remember what year, but pretty early, because he was in Sindh still. And he was walking on the street one day and was stopped by a person who happened to be a person from Baba's Mandali. And they asked him if he spoke the local language, and he did, of course. So he said yes. And they said, could you translate for us? And he said, sure. So they took him to somebody that looked like a beggar. It actually was a must. And they said that we are trying to talk to this guy. Can you translate? So he started translating, and they asked him to ask the guy something about what he's doing or what he does. And the guy looked at my grandfather, the must, and he said, well, I'm just a poor beggar. I'm not a judge like you. I'm not educated like you. So that made my grandfather go, wow, there's something. This guy is not, it's not what it appears to be. This guy is definitely advanced. So he asked the Mandali member about, who are you guys? What are you doing? And he said, well, we work with Meher Baba. So that was his first hearing of Baba's name. He forgot about it. And the partition happened. He moved to India, what was then divided India. Years later in Pune, they happened to move to Pune. He found, he was at a doctor's appointment, a doctor's office. And while he was going up the stairs to see the doctor, coming down the stairs from the same doctor's office was Baba. And definitely my grandfather was very taken just by his physical form. And he asked the doctor, he said, who was that guy who walked like a king? And the doctor told him it was Meher Baba. You know, it's still, funnily, the bell didn't ring yet for him, that this might be the man who was the answer to his search. So he kept searching. He eventually found Sri Aurobindo, who he thought would be an ideal master, and he was about to give everything up and move to Pondicherry, which is where Aurobindo's ashram is. And quite by chance, he went to a relative's house and found Baidol, which was one of Baba's close mandali, and shared with him that he's getting ready to go. And Baidol told him quite rudely that, I think you've lost your mind. And he said, excuse me. And he said, well, you know, Meher Baba, who is the avatar of the age, is right here in Pune, and you've just you're just giving up everything to go to a guru. And I guess Aurobindo had just dropped his body, so he was not even a living master then. So Bedu was quite strong with him and really urged him to see Baba. And I guess my grandfather said, it doesn't hurt, I'll go see. So he used to go for walks in Bund Gardens, which are not far from Guru Prasad. And he just decided one day to show up at Guru Prasad. Like I said, really strong person, a little bit entitled. So he just showed up at Guru Prasad asking to meet Baba. And, of course, that's not how it works. So the Mandli would come out and tell him, no, you need, Baba's working or in seclusion or whatever, you need to get an appointment. But he just didn't do that. He kept showing up every day, every evening, until one day, I think Erich came out and said that Baba's asking who this person is, who wants to see me every day. So he saw Baba, and he always told me that Baba was nothing like what he had imagined God to be. It was hot. It was Indian summer in Guru Prasad. So he was in, shorts and no top, and end of the day. And he said, I saw God, and he was half naked and he was a man. But he had a very great conversation, the first conversation, I think, was very, very human, very light, but also very assuring. It was intriguing enough that he went back, and Baba told him right away that we have a connection. And what I learned later and connected the dots for me was that Baba was about to come here to Myrtle Beach for his last visit in 1958. And he told my grandfather, I have a connection with you, and I'm going to renew it once I come back from the West. And then he came here. So it's really sweet for me that the timing of that coincided. So anyway, Baba worked with him beautifully, very closely throughout his life. Just worked with him just as he needed it. But there was also the question of my grandmother, who was the other player in the story. And she, I'll tell you a little bit about her, so it'll make more sense. She came from also a Sindhi family, and a very spiritually inclined family. They had a lineage of gurus that they followed. So it was like in the Indian Hindu system, there's succession of gurus. So they were associated with a guru, and then obviously eventually he passed on the torch to another guru. So that lineage is still going. I have family members and cousins that are still involved in that. So my grandmother was part of that. She was very close to this guru she had, and was always spiritually inclined. But he was a guru, he was not God. And she was very curious as a child about God. So there is this great story that when she was about 6 years old, she wrote a letter to God. And she said, God, if you really exist, she might have even said that she's asking her family where God is and why she can't see him. So she said, God, if you really exist, I want to see you in this life. And I think she put to God in heaven, and she actually posted that letter. And of course, she forgot all about it, like children do. So fast forward to when my grandfather met Baba, I think it didn't even occur to him to take his family, because his path was so singular and it was all about his search. But Baba started asking about his family, about his wife. He had 2 sons. He started asking about them. And then he said to Prem, my grandfather, why don't you bring your wife? I really want to meet her. So he broached the subject with my grandmother, and she said, definitely not. I don't need a guru. I already have a guru. I don't need to go. So my grandfather took the message back to him, to Baba, and Baba said, well, tell her not to come to me as a guru or God, just come to see a friend. So that message was conveyed back to her, and she agreed, okay, she would go just to see a friend. So she went. I think initially she was just didn't know what to make of it. And then over time, she kept going back. The biggest question for her, actually, let me backtrack. So connecting it to the story, was she kept going back, but wasn't quite convinced. And then one day, Baba said to her, don't you remember you wrote a letter to me? And she didn't remember. And he had to remind her, and he said, remember you wrote a letter to me asking for me to see you if I existed. And here I am. And all of this is the answer to that letter. So that was, of course, that sealed the deal. It gives me chills to even tell the story, because I can just imagine what she felt. The other quick thing, the second part of her conviction was, once she was convinced he was God, her big question was, why does he keep repeating that he's God? She thought it was a little bit egoistic to keep saying, I'm God, I'm the highest of the high, I'm the avatar. So that was a question in her mind, but she was a shy Indian woman in those days and could never voice it. So one day she was at Guru Prasad with Baba, and all of a sudden, through Erich, Baba said, Girja, who are you? And she said, excuse me. And Erich said, well, Baba's saying, can you tell me, are you a man or a woman? And she said, well, I'm a woman. And are you married? Are you not married? She's like, well, I'm married. Very obvious questions. And she was like, why is Baba asking me these questions? And then he said, well, just as you know, you don't even have to think about it. Just as you know you're a woman, just as you know you're married, just as you know you're a mother, all those things, I know that I'm God. And why would I not say it? So for her, that really sealed the deal. And I don't think it ever bothered her that Baba was declaring himself to be God after that. Anyway, this is just the tip of the iceberg with their stories, with my grandparents' stories. There are so many more stories, and stories of their kids, my dad and his brother, everyone's own story. But in terms of my grandparents, I lived with them and learned a lot from them. They were both very, very strong people and very committed to Baba. But what was interesting was they were committed to him in a very different way than each other, almost opposite ways, I would say. So that was my first lesson in what I saw unfolding in front of my eyes, which was, it was clear to me that Baba works with everyone in a very unique, almost a customized way. And he allows us to love him in whatever ways that suit us, depending on our sanskaras, our circumstances, and he meets us where we are, because he's the one who knows us from Adam. He knows us from more than we know ourselves. So with my grandfather in his latter life, when I knew him, he was, his sadhana was very private. Like I said earlier, his approach was very singular. He was strong, he was very courageous with his beliefs, and quite honestly, he just didn't care how others did things. He knew what he needed to do. And same was true with Baba, very internal. For my grandmother, she was completely the opposite, completely hard. It was just all hard. You hear of people who would give away their everything to a person in need. That was her. She functioned completely only from the heart. So her Baba connection was very devotional, a lot to do with music and Baba programs. She loved going to Baba programs. So, she would take buses and trains and everything all over Bombay to make it to a Baba program. And my grandfather always thought that was crazy. He just thought that was a complete waste of time. Why would you do that when you can access Baba inside? So yeah, they used to argue a lot. In fact, they fought a lot throughout their marriage, and Baba used to be their moderator. There are stories of several times Baba locking himself up in a room with both of them and solving their disputes. he had, for them, he had this sign, like a clash, and it also later became Baba's sign for marriage. So if you ever wondered why his sign was that, it actually came from my grandparents' very argumentative marriage. But, the bottom line is that despite their outer differences, they were both right there with Baba, 100%, more than 100%. And they were really true to who they were. And I think that was even true for the Mandli. I spent a lot of time with all of them, and they were each so different. They each had such a unique flavor of Baba. And it makes me feel like if someone were ever trying to package the Baba movement into something, I think they would fail, because just like Baba's words, there's lots of paradoxes and ironies and contrasting views. And the Mandli, to me, proved that. They have very different personalities, and they express Baba's love very differently. But again, there was something in common, that conviction. And to me, they proved again and again that Baba is a way of living. It's like he said, let your life be my message of love and truth. So I think they set that ideal for all of us. I work at the center, as you all know, with the media team. Buzz, Scott, Jamie are with me on that team, and we review a lot of archival materials and videos of the Mandli and videos of people who met Baba. These are quite some characters, as Baba liked them. But we always talk about, is this a good one? Is this a good video? Is it a relevant talk? Is this something that's going to resonate with young people, newer people? And I have to say that before I did this work, I would have skipped a lot of these talks. Part of it is because, especially with the Mandli videos, I still have to admit that I get really sad when I watch them, because I miss my uncles and aunties that I grew up with, and to see them just being rendered to a screen is a little hard for me. It feels like an end of an era. But partly it was also because of my misconception of thinking, oh, I've heard these stories before, or these stories don't apply to me, or they're not my story. But I think I was really wrong. And that's another thing I find with Baba. He is very skilled at proving to us again and again that we were wrong. And he makes us see things in different light. And I think I was wrong because it doesn't matter. I'm starting to see that it doesn't matter where someone is from or what time period they lived in, how old they are, because I think their stories are just rich. Their stories are universal in their love and search and longing for Baba. It's kind of like reading Shakespeare. It's timeless because it's so masterfully crafted, keeping in mind the deep human traits that never change. So I think it's also relevant. I find that that's such a big question in the Baba world, what is relevant right now? And I think everything is relevant. And time, to me, doesn't matter. I think there are lessons that we can incorporate in our life right now. So yeah, right now, what can we do right now? To me, that's the question. About my own, thanks for listening to all the family background, the long family background. But a little bit about my own experience. Like I said, I didn't have anything major. But growing up in a Baba family, there were some misconceptions too. I always wanted to read and be intellectually stimulated. So I was looking for answers in that way. I studied literature, writing, I was interested in philosophy, and the Baba world when I was a child and still was such a love bubble. No one really talked about teachings. Everyone said that was for the future because we had this amazing resource of being so close within his love. But I was looking for answers. And even though I knew Baba had written books like Discourses and God Speaks, somehow stupid me, I didn't quite look into those for the answers. I became very keenly interested in Vedanta, which is basically the spiritual philosophy behind Hinduism. And I took several classes and courses in Vedanta, which was great. I I'm very grateful for that, because it really is a manual for practical living that helped me. But the point that this brings home is there's a saying in Hindi. It's called "Ghar ki murgi dal barabar," which means that the chicken curry cooked at home is like dal. So you kind of take it for granted. And I think I did that a little bit. I took for granted, or never quite understood then, the element of intimacy and companionship and true experience that we have with Baba. And I think that was another seed that was sown, but it's now that I'm trying to actually believe what an amazing thing that is. The other concept that didn't know as a child or growing up was Baba's inner work, and how it's so closely tied to his companionship. When we read about the Mandli, and I think of Bal Natu or Darwin Shaw, these stalwarts in Baba, I feel like they had these exquisite lives with Baba. They had these amazing experiences. Talk about stories. They had coming to Baba stories like we've never seen, all the Mandli. But to me, it feels like all that journey, it's like a circle. It ended up in the simplest thing. And that simplest thing was their inner companionship with Baba at all times. And I feel proved wrong again, because you can go study philosophies, you can go out there, you can achieve, there's so much to do. And then here are the closest lovers of God, and they have strived their whole life to achieve something so simple. It's like Jesus's saying of the kingdom of God is within you. And on some level, it's a little anticlimactic. It's like, all this journey for something so simple as companionship. Is this a joke? But no, it's not. It's Baba's divine humor. To me, thinking of myself as a young adult, I think it's really good news, because companionship is available to us right here, right now. We don't need intellectual and philosophical excursions, because Baba is so active and so accessible within us. It just doesn't matter who we are or what we're doing. What matters is how we're involving Baba in our lives. One last quick story is a story I read in Rick Chapman's book, How to Choose a Guru. I read this book as a teenager, and this story still stayed with me. It's called Turning of the Key. A lot of you might know this story. It's about this man who dedicated his life to a master and was accepted by the master to go and live with the master. And he was really excited. He really wanted God realization, and he thought his life would be to sit around the master and listen to discourses and get elevated spiritually. But he showed up, and the master said that he's decided to assign him to the kitchen. And the man said, really, I really want to be near you. And he said, yeah, one day. So the guy goes to the kitchen and waits. The master says, it's not time yet. He keeps asking for several years, and then many years pass and he's not been called. He's still just in the kitchen. And eventually, I think his desire to get out of the kitchen even faded away. And he spent decades and decades in the kitchen, never got to do what he wanted to do with the master. And eventually, I think Rick writes that one day, all of a sudden, bam, the master turned the key and the man was God realized. And I think the story has stayed with me because it's a great story. It is so uplifting and it's so inspiring. It makes me feel like we can do whatever, even in the minutest tasks. It totally doesn't matter what we do. We can have a job, we can stay at home, we can be in the world, we can do whatever we want to do as long as we involve Baba. And it's also very encouraging because it feels like nothing is a waste with Baba. And I think it also is what Baba said, living in the world and not being off it. We've all had our challenges and suffering with Baba. It's again one of those. But I think within all of that, Baba does not promise us riches. He doesn't promise us miracles, no assurity of even things going well. We've got nothing of that. But he does promise us this companionship. And the greatest thing for me is I don't need any tools for that. It's available right here. There are no prerequisites. There's no tools. There's no practice. It's phenomenal that we can access this right here, just within ourselves. In fact, I think that is the fact that we don't have a practice is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, like any challenge is. Because we don't have a practice, it's not easy for us. People who have a practice could just do the practice, and you do the practice for the day, you're done, and then you live your life. But it's hard for us because we have to involve him in everything we do. Our whole life is a practice for us. And we don't always succeed. It's really hard, but we rise and we try again and we try again and again. Every time I fail, I think, Baba said, true love is not for the faint-hearted. It's not easy. Our path is not easy. But I think he also helps us. That's what the Mandli always said, that challenges are good because you get to see Baba being able to help us. So I think it's as a young adult, it's a great time. It's a time that's really alive. Some people say it's such a hard time in the world, and yes, it is. There's no denying that. Some people say, I have friends who say, oh, don't you want a living master? But he is living. That's why we're all here. We feel him right here. And I feel like he couldn't be more alive than he is right now within us. And that is just, I think for me, that is just the bottom line. He's alive and we're all right here with him. I think my time's up. I was asked to talk a little bit about the East and the West, because we talked about that yesterday, just about, how I see the East and the West coming together, being from India and living here. So I'll just say a few lines on that, and then I'll wrap it up. We all know Baba said he came to put the East and the West together. We're seeing it, in our generation. We see that we can connect with each other. Our cultural gaps are just narrowing. I personally feel like I neither belong here nor there, and I belong here and there. When growing up, I grew up in a very cosmopolitan environment, very Western. There were many Indian things that I thought I did not connect with, like rituals and ceremonies and all those things. But when I came to America, there were also many American things that I did not connect with. I saw myself in a different light. I had faith in God and had traditional values of community and family, which were very Indian things that I didn't see when I lived in India. So I've always felt like it's a pickle. Where do I fit? Do I fit here? Do I fit there? I guess it's both, and it's all. And at the end of the day, I think we all just belong to Baba. So that's what really matters. All right. I got nothing more to say. Jai Baba. Thank you.